Alright, hello and welcome back to the Real Guy Garage. I take an opportunity here while I had stuff moved around in the garage, talk about one project that I haven't mentioned yet. This of course is my 1973 Plymouth Fury I four-door sedan. I originally purchased this car in, I believe it was about February or March of 2015. Went to look at it and ended up buying it. Didn't get it home till early April when the ground had thawed and we could get it moved basically from where it was. This car and I sort of have a long history together. Basically, I remember the car from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old. The car was a Whitby native, much like myself, and it sat right across the street from the park my mother used to take me to quite a bit as a child. So because of that, I sort of vividly remember it. And I don't know, I guess something somewhere sparked. I can remember it first time being listed for sale probably around 2009, 2010. Of course, at that time I was in no position. I was still in high school and what have you, but by the time 2015 rolled around, I was in a position, and I went and I looked at it, and I made the cruel mistake of slipping in behind the steering wheel and firing it up, and well, the rest was history. So it's been a long project so far. Not going to bore anybody with the details too much, just because it would take me about 5 parts of video just to catch up to where we are. But essentially, the history of the car goes back about 5 owners. It's always been an Ontario car. It was sold new to the Canadian National Exhibition Association. There's a big debate as to whether this was a giveaway car or what it was, but the way it was spec'd out is kind of odd in itself, because it's spec'd out more like a police package car than it is a civilian model. From the factory, it came with heavy duty suspension package. It came with the all vinyl interior rubber floors. It came with electric trunk release, rear defrost, heavy duty cooling system. You know, it came with a lot of the fleet stuff that you ordinarily would not have on a base model car. And all the research I can find about this particular car points me towards the direction that when it was ordered, they kind of tacked an extra car onto the Ottawa police order, because that's what Ottawa police was running in 73, were Fury 1s with 318s in them, which is what this car is. So I'm kind of leaning towards that there's probably a fair bit of factuality to that. But in the time I've owned it, I've changed a lot of little things on it and stuff. I won't go into the huge boring story of why I've chosen to do the car the way I am, but I will give a brief, I don't know, summation of it, I guess. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, there was a program called Child Find, and I don't know if it was a cross Canada thing or if it was North America or what it was exactly, or even if it's still around. I would hope it would be, because at the time it was a pretty groundbreaking program. Basically, police departments were able to help parents put together information packages about their children so that should they had ever been kidnapped, the children would have been easier to locate. So what it was is my mom took me down to the OPP station that was down the road from us, Ontario Provincial Police Station, which that was the Whitby Highway Safety Division. And the kit included, basically, there were photographs of the child. There was an information sheet which pointed out any discernible differences with the child, so any birthmarks, any etc. And then the police, whichever department that you went to, they fingerprinted the child, so you had a copy of fingerprints. And I can't remember what else there was part of it, but at the end of the day, essentially what I'm rambling towards is that here I was 3 years old. My mom took me down to the OPP station, and the constable, he was great. I mean, he was an honest, nice guy. And he showed me around the station. He showed me all the holding cells and what have you. And then he took me out to their little garage that's still there. It's about, I think, a 3 or 4 car garage. It's not very big. They mostly use it for cleaning cruisers. And he set me in a cruiser, which was, now I know, a Caprice, which it would have been one of the last 9C1 Caprices. And he sort of let me play with the radio and the siren and all that stuff and the lights and what have you, and it kind of placed an idea in my head that was there for a long time. So while I never ended up going down that path of career, I have always had a good admiration for those officers who truly are in it for the right reasons. So when I got this car, the only idea I had for it in mind was to clone it into being a historically accurate depiction of a Highway Safety Division car. I originally did have aspirations of painting it black and white scheme and equipping it with all the roof lighting and everything, but I ended up kinda, sort of, really liking the gold, which this is. The car's been painted twice that I can find. I know it was painted around 2000 or so. I don't know when it was painted prior to that, but I know there's 3 layers of paint on it, the original and 2 others. So this car is Y6 Golden Haze is what Plymouth's name for it was. So it's going to go back to that color eventually, one day, maybe. But anyway, that's sort of where its backstory, I guess. So the first summer I had the car, I worked my nuts off, and I got it to the point where this car ran and drove good. It didn't have any holes in it, well, that I knew of anyway. And it was a running, driving car. And I put it on the road, and that's when every problem that potentially could happen started. Prior to that, the car had not been on the road since 2004. So the car had essentially sat around for 11 years, slowly but surely disintegrating. And it created a lot of problems for me. So I ended up, I fought the problems as much as I could. I fixed as much as I could. I learned a hell of a lot from this car the first summer I had it. Just because of the amount of problems I had, I was able to learn from them. But come winter, I parked for the winter, and come the next spring, I was still fighting with a lot of issues, so I ended up not doing a whole lot with the car that summer. I had the transmission in and out of it twice. I had the gas tank in and out of it twice. So fast forward to that winter, and that was the winter 2016. I brought the car home at the end of November, and they dropped it off the roll deck there, and I drove it into the garage. Well, I backed it into the garage, and other than one short trip it made that year to get the glass pulled out of it, the car has not left this garage since probably March or April 2017. And I do realize that now we are in 2021, and that would be 4 years since this car has left this building. I honestly think it would be at least that long, because the last time it was actually outside would have been the summer 2017. So yeah, it's been a while. Last time I drove it was, like I say, November 2016. So it started out as supposed to be a simple winter project. Had two major things end up sort of sidelining the project. One of those things was life in general. I'm sure that every person with a project car has run into that life does get in the way and slow things down. That's a part of, well, life. The other problem was, for every one thing I had planned to repair, I found 10 more that were a problem. That was kind of the bigger issue with this car. It had a coolant leak, and I couldn't get it to time right, and the transmission leaked, and I knew I had a water leak somewhere in the car. So the front fenders were rotten. I bought fenders off a friend of mine, Mike, in North Carolina, and brought them back. So I planned to change those. So the grand plan was I'd pull the front fenders off. If I had to, I'd pull the motor and transmission out of it so I could regasket the engine, and so that I could replace the frost plugs in the back of the block, because I knew that's where my one coolant leak was, because I could see the coolant run down from the back of the engine block and drip out of the bell housing of the transmission. So I knew that was one of my problems. So the grand plan was put a timing chain in the motor, because I was pretty sure, I could never get the balancer to line up at 0 degrees on number 1 top dead. So I knew I had problems. But the car ran well. That was the thing. It always ran well, had lots of power for what it was. So fast forward ahead a little bit, we pull the motor and trans out. I pull the fenders off, and I get a nasty, nasty surprise when I get the fenders off. I had a lot of rust to deal with under the fenders. A lot. And that's kind of its own story altogether. So I'll briefly touch on that in a second. So a quicker story to tell is the engine transmission. So the transmission always had a leak. I take it at the time where I was working, there was a transmission shop right behind us. I got them to have a look at it, because at that point I had it apart once. I had another transmission shop have a look at it. And I was just tired of it. So that was Whippy Transmission. Kyle and Dave, they had a look at the transmission, and they figured out that my only problem was the neck of the torque converter, where it goes through the front pump seal. It had a groove war in it, so the fluid was running down that groove and dripping out. That was my problem. So they went through the transmission, put it back together for me, and got me a new converter. That solved my transmission problem, because that transmission itself is a very, very well built unit. It actually came out of another friend of mine's car when the previous owner had this car, and that's how it ended up in this car, because the transmission calved in this car, and the guy's brother worked with my friend, and that transmission was actually built as a race transmission. But the engine, as I started tearing it apart, I realized that not only had someone else been in there prior to me, which as far as I knew nobody had ever, but it it was just worn. The motor, somebody had done minor work to keep it running, but in reality it had never been rebuilt, and after 110,000 miles of absolutely being beaten to death and not maintained by previous owners, the further I dug into the engine, the more problems I found. The cam bearings were wiped. The cam itself was worn. Lifters were all worn in it. The crankshaft bearings were all scored. The timing chain was an original nylon coated timing chain that these came from the factory, and the nylon had come off it and it had jumped a couple teeth, so it was actually almost 30 degrees of play in the timing chain. So that's why I could never get it timed right. Just the more I looked into the motor, the more problems I found. The whole cooling system, someone had ran water in the car at some point, and everything was scaled. The whole cooling system was polluted. So at this point, I've replaced every single part of the cooling system, including the heater core and the radiator. So, it was just a lot of problems like that. One of the motor mounts was broken. The oil pump was scored so bad I don't know how it had oil pressure. It just, everything was worn out on it. So I made the conscious decision that I'd go ahead and tear the motor right down to a bare block and rebuild it. And that's what I ended up doing. I didn't want to play with it too much because it is, yeah, I mean, it's a 318 and I didn't want a radical motor or anything in this car. At the end of the day, what I ended up doing is, this is actually the numbers matching 318 for this car for some reason. So I went down to a bare block, had a machine shop clean and check everything, and it's got 360 heads on it that I did, 340 intake. It's got a 73 340 spec camshaft in it. I put a 90-degree filter adapter on it. I put a windage tray in it. It's got a double roller timing chain in it. It's not a wild motor, but it's a little bit peppier motor than what it started out as, being a worn out 318 two barrel. So I did that. Transmission, like I said, it was built and set up to be used in a car that at the time I believe had a 408 in it. So it's a 74 727. It's got the main shaft and the output shaft out of a Cummins 727 because they're hardened shafts. It's got a 73 part kickdown valve body in it. I put a B&M separator plate and shift kit in it. It's got, a little bit upgraded bands, a little bit upgraded clutches. It's not a screamer, but it's a good transmission. So I ended up doing that. And then I found on the firewall, it was a mess. I ended up at this point, I can't tell you how much of this firewall is original because I can't remember. I've replaced so much of it, it's not funny. But the entire driver's side body mount that connects to the stub was completely gone. Somebody had been in there and boogered it all up when the subframe was changed, because this is a subframe from another Fury. I don't know. I know approximately when it was changed. I don't know a whole lot other than that, though. So I've replaced quite a bit on this, and I'm still working on it. I mean, we're going on I don't know how many years now, but I've done whole outside of the firewall and the body mount. I've done the entire driver's side floor pans and everything. And yes, it's a little pinholey, this pan, but it's the best I had to work with. And I will go back and weld those all closed again. And I replaced all the passenger side floor pan. Luckily the rear on this side was nice and solid still. Near as I can tell from the factory, they overpacked the seam sealer in the top of the firewall where the drains are. So from day one, it it never drained properly, and it was just rotting from the inside out, basically. So we had to go and fix that all, but that's okay, because car was Z-barred from new, and everything that wasn't eaten from the inside out, so from the front seat back, is actually pretty solid. Now this door here is a complete mess. It is mostly body filler. So I got a skin off another door. My friend Jason Boyton sent that up from Texas for me, because I don't even want to think about trying to fix this mess. Yeah, I mean, you can see it. It's not, I'm not even real close at it, but the door gets thick. You know, doors aren't supposed to get thicker at the bottom. And I also got lower quarter panels from the same car that Jason had, which was an original paint car. And they're laying there. I gotta drill the spot welds and peel them out, because again, everything from that tape line down, there's a lot of body filler. But like I said, we've done a lot of work. I've reconstructed all the inner part of this cowl here, because it was rotted right out again. So I fixed that. I fixed all the top. I fixed all where the heater box was. I still gotta fix a bit of rust over on that side there that you can maybe kind of see. But we're getting there. We're getting there. And I got a kind of donor firewall over here that I've been putzing around with. But at this point, I've rebuilt everything, and it's gotten to the point now where, to me, there's not a single part of this car that I will have not touched by the time it goes back together. I rebuilt the steering box. I rebuilt all the sway bar, so it's got all new bushings and everything in it. I boxed the lower control arms. I put new bushings in them. It's got new strut rod bushings. It's got cobwebs too. But yeah, I was able to find, I actually ended up buying a whole set of spindles just so I could get a set of backing plates off it, because those are original backing plates from California. So they're really nice. Put new old stock lower ball joints in it, new upper ball joints, new control arm bushings, all new brake lines and hoses. I rebuilt the calipers. Every single thing has been to bare metal and then brought back from that point. It's got new shock absorbers. It's got, I've replaced everything, bearing seals, every bushing, every piece of rubber, even the control arm bumpers are new. All the tie rods are new. It's got a new pitman arm on it. It's got a new idler arm on it. I went through and reconditioned all the torsion bars. I freed up the pivots inside the control arms, the lowers, because that's something that I noticed seems to happen quite a bit with the C bodies, is that the control arm pivots seize up. So then you can't properly adjust anything in them. But anyway, so I fixed that. I think the only thing original in the front steering system, other than the adjusting sleeves, is the steering box and the center link. Other than that, it's all been replaced. Unfortunately, they don't make, for some reason, reproduction boots for the torsion bars, so these ones are originals that I cleaned up. And then the other thing they don't make are torsion bar clips for C bodies, which I apologize, it's hard to see in there. So again, they're originals. It's a little bit frustrating because they make them for everybody else but the C body guys. But yeah, I'm kind of happy because I'm starting to get there now. The motor's fresh, transmission's fresh, steering, suspension, and brakes are fresh. Ways up underneath the back there, underneath those blue blankets, is the rear differential for this car. I've rebuilt all of it. It's got a 323 sure grip in it now. 489 case, it's a nice unit. I rebuilt the springs, the original heavy-duty springs. You know, I've put all new bushings in them, put all new friction plates, all that stuff. So finally starting to progress somewhere. It's been a long project.